Hello, everyone. It's a beautiful day in New York City, and we're going to start the day at Cafe Chelsea, which is a brand new restaurant in the famous Chelsea Hotel, where so many famous musicians and artists lived when they were really at their peak, like Jimi Hendrix, Andy Warhol, Patti Smith. Too many to name, honestly. I got the pain perdu, which is sort of a brioche French toast, and it was so good. Highly recommend. 10 out of 10. We're now going to make our way to three galleries in Chelsea today, starting with Pace Gallery with an exhibit of works by Julian Schnabel. I always love seeing a Schnabel show. His exhibit at the Brandt Foundation a few years ago was legendary. It highlighted a lot of his plate paintings, which are some of my favorites. And this show is a continuation of his series where he paints on velvet, which he started doing back in the 80s. And the last place we saw this was an exhibition at Pace in LA that we all went to together back in May of 2002. So I will leave that linked above and below if you want to check that out. So something cool that Schnabel does that's fairly unique to him, mostly because not many painters are also film producers, but what he does is sometimes when he's working on a film, he creates his paintings sort of in parallel to the film, gathering inspiration from the film and then reflecting that in his works. So the works that you see here were made while working on his seventh film, In the Hand of Dante, which is an adaptation of Nick Tosh's novel, which has the same name. The novel weaves together multiple storylines, so it follows Dante, the famous Italian poet, as he writes his epic poem, The Divine Comedy, in the 14th century. And the narrative also revolves around a present-day writer named Nick Tosches, tasked with authenticating a newly discovered manuscript of Dante's work. So as Tosches delves into Dante's life and the world of rare books, he becomes engrossed in this complex and mysterious journey. So the novel blends historical fiction, literary exploration, a modern-day quest, exploring themes of art, obsession, and enduring power of literature. Schnabel clearly appears to be inspired by the art history elements of the film, particularly the Renaissance, which of course started in the late 14th century and continued into the 15th and 16th century. You can see references of this in works like this one called Gesù deriso, or Jesus Mocked, which refers directly to a Renaissance fresco by the Dominican monk Fra Angelico in the famous monastery of San Marco in Florence. Another example of this is a piece you probably spotted when we first entered the exhibit. I initially thought that it was multiple works, but it's actually one work made up of 10 panels, and it's meant to represent a retablo, which is an architecturally scaled painting that sits behind the altars of Renaissance and Baroque churches across Southern Europe. The next show that we're going to see is actually just upstairs, which is one of the nice things about mega galleries. You can see so many exhibits, sometimes without ever having to leave the building. This is an exhibit by the French-American artist Jules de Balincourt, and this exhibit is titled Midnight Movers, and it's his first show in New York in almost a decade. Balincourt is best known for creating works that blur the line between fantasy and reality. And I think this is due to his color palette as well as the looseness with which he captures his subject matter, which often explores how people interact with nature, both in conflicting and harmonious ways. So, some key things throughout all of the works are alienation, migration, and ambiguity. And one of my favorite works in the show is one that highlights this feeling of alienation and also potentially migration really well by capturing what looks like an abandoned hotel where there's debris and an empty pool. And just overall, the scene has this underlying tension that we as the viewer experience thanks to these unanswered questions like, why was this place abandoned? And this is true in many of Balincourt's works. So the gallery states that, quote, a prevailing ambiguity underlies these moments of transit. Are Balincourt's figures in motion, out of leisure, or out of desperation? Are they partaking in a bucolic stroll or a long march, as if escaping from some unseen threat? I also want to call out that all of the works are oil paint on wood panel. The next exhibit that we're going to see is at Petzel Gallery, and it's an exhibit of works by Charline von Heyl. So von Heyl is fresh off of exhibiting at the 2022 Venice Biennial, which I was very lucky to be able to capture in a video that I will leave linked above and below. If you're not familiar with Charline von Heyl, she's a German abstract painter. Although her abstract works consist of collages of shapes and almost recognizable figures, as opposed to pure paint splatters and drips, which is what we normally think of when you think of abstract art. Considering the Venice Biennial was only a year ago, it's pretty incredible how many works she's produced since then. In all, there are 15 large-scale works in this exhibit and 70 some odd smaller works that are all compiled together on one wall. And as far as their meaning, I'm going to leave that to you all to interpret. The gallery doesn't provide much background at all, so I'm just going to let you all enjoy them as they are. The final show that we're going to see today is at Matthew Mark's gallery, and it's an exhibit of works by Wade Guyton. And right out of the gate, you can really appreciate the uniqueness of this exhibit thanks to how the artworks are displayed. So, Guyton has actually duplicated the racks that were in the studio space that he moved into in 2021. It was previously occupied by a clothing company that left the metal racks, and instead of removing them, he repurposed them to hang his paintings for storage. So, this is a really fun recreation of that. If you're not familiar with Wade Guyton, he creates his works digitally and then runs the canvas through a commercial inkjet printer. So these paintings include all kinds of references important to the artist and his daily life, such as, quote, photographs that he's taken of his studio, wet ink from paintings in processes, screenshots of the New York Times homepage, bitmap files, a 16-year-old transparency of one of his ex paintings, which he's really famous for, a Manet still life, and a view from his studio window. And that's all for today, but fear not, there are actually so many exhibits on view in Chelsea right now that I've created a part 2 to this video. Well, I will share even more exhibits on view. So if you want to watch that next week, please subscribe if you're not subscribed. It'll just let you know when that video goes live, and I will see you all in my next video.